Chinese communists continue to grow their influence in Texas. Plus, a new documentary answers the question, do Democrats run the Texas House? I'm Brandon Waltons. This is The Headline. Last year, Texas Scorecard looked at the influence of communist China in the Lone Star State. Now, 1 year later, we have a new investigative series updating on those efforts and actually looking into what has happened since. We have Robert Montoya, investigative reporter. Robert, this series that's put out, before we get into some of the details of what the series looked into, why look now a year later? There was a lot of reporting a year ago, and yet even more stuff has come out since.
Yes, and by the way, thanks to the ace of my staff, Kristen Stanchia, for an amazing work this year as well as last year. The reason why is because tensions between the communist Chinese government and America stakes keep rising up. And we always kind of felt like we didn't get everything last year. And as this is going to be an ongoing concern, our intention has been, okay, let's keep looking deeper and deeper and deeper. And on that note, what we have found is the infiltration of the CCP in Texas is deeper than previously thought.
One of the big focal points of the investigation, the original investigation, was China's influence in education, not just higher education, but also in high schools through Confucius Institutes, Confucius classrooms. It seems that since the reporting, and really over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of attention put on those. Those have sort of died down, but they haven't really left, have they?
Well, what happened was as some state governments, namely Florida, and also the federal government became wise to the threat of Confucius Institutes, Confucius classrooms, we found last year the CCP was engaging in a rebranding process. So they wanted to keep up the infiltration, but find a new name. So they started closing a lot of the Confucius operations down. But we found that this year there is still a Confucius classroom in operation at the Hearst Euless Bedford School District. Now, we found this out ourselves thanks to Kristen, and this comes just a month after the Daily Mail reported that they found one at Highland Park School District up in Dallas.
Any response from those school districts?
We contacted the school board president, Mr. Romero. He didn't respond. We raised this issue up with State Rep Brad Buckley and State Senator Brandon Crichton. They're the chairs of the education committees in the Texas legislature. They have not gotten back to us either.
What did you find at the University of Texas at Dallas? That looks suspicious.
Yeah, so the University of Texas at Dallas, they had a Confucius Institute and shut it down. But we found that they now have what's called a Center for Asian Studies. What's curious is we found multiple names there at that operation that also either work at the Confucius Institute that UT Dallas used to have or one elsewhere. So it's like you have a new brand name, but some of the same people. That's highly questionable.
Yeah, certainly sends off some alarms there. And what about this Chinese Students and Scholars Association?
Well, that's another operation that was created by the Chinese Communist Party. What's its purpose? Because Chinese Students and Scholars Association sounds innocuous, right? Its purpose is to monitor Chinese students and mobilize them against any views that oppose the CCP. But also, and Texans should be aware of this, it's also to gather information and spread propaganda. This doesn't sound good, does it?
Yeah, no, I should say not. Looking beyond even education, you found even some CCP connections that go into the governor's office in Texas.
Correct. Remember Mr. Sun Guangxin? He was the former Chinese general that bought quite a bit of land in Val Verde, Texas, close to a U.S. military installation. Now, he said he wanted to build a wind farm near the installation. Of course, as we later learned, that was for surveillance purposes. Well, what's curious is one of the companies he used to buy a good bit of that land is Brazos Highland Properties. Through our research, we found out that a lobbyist in 2019 for Brazos Highland Properties LP was Drew DeBerry. He was a former director for Governor Abbott. We contacted Governor Abbott, asked him for comment. He did not respond to us.
Lastly, I want to ask about the CCP's efforts to threaten those who are speaking out against this. You have one example in Bob Fu right here in Texas, who has been threatened by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes. Now, who is Mr. Bob Fu? He is a refugee. He escaped China, and now he is the founder and runs China Aid. They are out to help the persecuted Christian church in China. He lives here in Texas, and we came across an investigative report where when he wanted to testify in the Texas Senate this year during the regular legislative session, he was threatened by the CCP. It got to the point where State Senator Lois Kolkhorst had to bring in state police to make sure he was protected. And this isn't the first time that's happened. He's also been threatened at his home, and the FBI had to come in and protect him and his family from CCP agents operating here. This is Texas. This shows there's been a significant change where it used to be. Remember, during the Cold War, those who fled the Soviet Union, once they reached America, largely safe. No longer the case today if you're fleeing communist China.
Wow. And amazing to see that the legislature, despite the fact that they had opportunities to address some of this stuff, ultimately did not, at least during the regular session. Robert, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you, Brandon.
We'll be right back.
If you're not watching the Luke Macias Show, then you are not as engaged as everybody else is in Texas who's trying to make a difference, knowing exactly what's going on so that they can take action on the things that really matter. Guys, watch us on the Roku app for Texas Scorecard. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Get engaged, get more informed, so together we can actually make a bigger difference on things that matter for the future of Texas. God bless you.
Do Democrats run the Texas House? That's the question asked in a new documentary from Texas Scorecard, The Texas Heist. Here is a quick clip. Check it out.
When a stranger's picking your pocket, breaking into your house, stealing your car, what would you do? Maybe defend what's yours. Call a neighbor for help. Maybe even call the police. But it's different when the perpetrator is someone we know, someone we let into our house or borrow our car. None of us like to think we were duped. Mark Twain said, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled." This is why thieves and con men like Bernie Madoff are able to last so long. No one likes to admit they were taken advantage of. It might also explain why a dozen politicians seem to be getting away with stealing Texas from the voters.
Here to talk about the new documentary and what we learned along the way, we have Michael Quinn Sullivan. Michael, thank you so much for joining. Remote, not in the studio. So we miss you over here, but you're, of course, traveling the state. You got to travel the state as part of this Texas Heist documentary, talked to a lot of grassroots folks, people who have served in the Texas House, some other people. What was the biggest takeaway when making this documentary, looking at Democrats' control of the Texas House?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan, for having me. Look, we end up on camera, have about a dozen folks who we visit with, and then there were another dozen or more folks we visit with who, for various reasons, did not want to be on camera. The biggest takeaway from it, that I think for me, was that for all of the I'll be less than generous for a moment. All of the yammering and yapping from the pesky rabble, from the grassroots people, that it's like the Texas House is controlled by Democrats. What struck me was in all these conversations with current and former lawmakers, current and former state officials, that every one of them said, well, yeah, of course it is. There was not the pretense of you really have to understand things. Everyone just kind of understands that that's actually how it works. And I think that was I kept waiting for someone, former Democrat lawmaker, a Republican who's friendly with the establishment, who didn't want to be on the record for whatever reasons, say, but Michael, you need to understand this, or you're missing this important detail. Didn't get one of those. Not a one.
Much of the documentary takes a look at the Speaker of the House, and not just the current Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, but going back several cycles and the Democrats that ultimately helped put those people in charge. A lot of questions, right? Every legislative session we have about, well, how do we get a better speaker? How do we get a speaker that's not beholden to Democrats? Is there an answer to that?
The best answers, of course, come down to, voters have to do a better job of the questions that are placed to their incumbent lawmakers, and then be willing to hold them accountable for it. A lot of times what we have done as voters is we let the legislator lie to us, or we let them mitigate their own responsibility. And at some point, I think we have to start being willing to say, I know you're not the speaker, Representative Billy, I know you're not the speaker, but you voted for him and you're not committed to doing anything else. So it's time to find your replacement. We have to be the adults in the conversation. Second, I think, and this was something that was raised by a couple of people, we need to begin recognizing that, that despite what the Constitution says, the Speaker of the House has been elevated to a statewide office, which means just as all of us as voters are conversant on the policy positions of gubernatorial candidates and that we can express with some degree of confidence and some degree of education the positions of our statewide officials, whether it's the ag commissioner or the land commissioner or the governor, we need to start being able to do the same when it comes to the Speaker of the House, so that we're not bamboozled by their sycophantic friends.
Some of the elected officials that do appear in the documentary, current and former, include Attorney General Ken Paxton, Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller. We have Republican Party of Texas Chairman Matt Rinaldi. Did you find that they were really willing and open to talk about this issue?
They were, which was very nice. Obviously, with Attorney General Paxton, we wanted to make sure that we respected the gag order that was put in place regarding impeachment. But yet, all of them were more than happy to, particularly to talk about the maybe the most important thing for many of us of how did we get here. I think that even for those of us who have been kind of watching and covering and participating in state government for 20 years, it is easy to forget the nuances, to forget what happened. And those things are really important. If you're wanting to change history, first you got to make sure you know history. If you're wanting to make a difference in government, you got to know how you got to govern and how you got to that place to begin with. And so that was very helpful, I think, to be able to have this large number of folks willing to kind of go back in time, if you will, and put in context what we see today.
Last question. The documentary is out right now. Where can people watch it?
Hey, would love for folks to check it out. Of course, you can find it on the Texas Scorecard YouTube channel, youtube.com/Texas Scorecard. You can also find it, of course, at TexasScorecard.com. You can find it on Twitter and on Facebook. But maybe the most fun place to watch it is if you have a Roku device or an Apple TV or an iOS phone or an Android phone. You can download one of those Texas Scorecard apps and be able to watch the documentary there on your living room TV rather than, hovering over your laptop screen or something.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Headline. If you're checking us out on YouTube, go ahead, hit like, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can be notified every time we have new content for you here at Texas Scorecard. For right now, I'm Brandon Waltons. Have a great weekend.
No ads, no paywalls, no government grants, and no corporate masters. Just real news for real Texans. This is Texas Scorecard.